What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Retro Movie Podcast, the podcast where everything is connected. I'm your host, Jacob Thompson, and joining me is my co-host, friend, and the person most likely to, when he's driving on the road and he sees a car full of kids, just runs into them, just runs them off the road. Alex Perkins. Perk, how you doing today?
Dude, that was so out of pocket.
It was so insane.
Oh my God, they just murdered children.
It was so fast.
I get that the propaganda machine, I understand, but you think you'd see like a paper truck just murder children and be like, something is afoot.
Yeah, hey, no, they said the kids were hurt. The mom's like, there's kids hurt all over town.
Oh, dead. Beyond dead. Like, what?
Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. This is the show where every week Perk and I review a movie connected. It's the last one we watched. If you like our show, we post pretty much every Friday on YouTube and podcast services. Give us a follow on TikTok as well. But yeah, last week we watched the Alfred Hitchcock classic Vertigo, and we followed the lead James Stewart to this week's movie, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Perk, why don't you intro it for us?
Yeah, all right. So Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is a 1939 joint directed by Frank Capra, starring the aforementioned James Stewart and Jean Arthur. It is about Mr. Smith, and he goes to Washington.
There we go.
All right, we'll see you guys next week. Yep. No, it's a young man who's the head of the Boy Rangers in an unnamed state.
Yeah, why do they never say the state? It's so weird to me.
I don't know, but it's somewhere out in the prairie lands.
Yeah.
And it's based on a story called The Man from Montana or something.
Oh, okay.
So the answer is Montana, but it's not specified. And yeah, he goes to Washington and finds corruption and tries to take a stand against it. Some fun facts about this movie, and there are a lot, so feel free to do some digging of your own, but the scenes where James Stewart is wandering around Washington and looking at monuments were technically stolen because the Park Service had denied them the right to take those. Which is interesting.
Yeah. They work well, though.
Yeah. When the movie came out, Washington insiders, quote, bitterly denounced the movie and were angry about its allegations of corruption. But in fascist Europe, the movie was banned because it shows that democracy works. A good dichotomy.
Yeah.
In 1942, when American films were banned in France, which was occupied by Germany, theaters chose this movie as the last one to show, and one of them ran this movie nonstop straight for 30 days up until the ban.
Dang.
So clearly there was some powerful messaging that they wanted people to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I got for you.
There we go.
Oh, and sorry, the Boy Scouts wanted no part of it, so that's why they made up the Boy Rangers.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. Did you
see? This is so old. I just assumed that there was something called the Boy Rangers, but
yeah, I mean, they get the point across.
Yeah.
Did you mention that Frank Capra, the director, also directed It's a Wonderful Life?
I did not, but there you go.
There you go. For those who don't know, I didn't know.
Also starring James Stewart.
Yeah, there you go. James Stewart, man, he's got it.
Yeah. So as a quick interjection, like when we decided to do a string of classics, I was like, oh yeah, we're gonna watch like some Brando, and now here we are, where in the last 3 months I've watched 4 James Stewart movies, and I'm like, I would have not even picked this name out of a hat, and oh boy, would that have been a mistake. This guy rocks.
And he's way younger in this one than he was in the we've seen him so far, which was interesting to see.
Almost 20 years younger than in Vertigo.
Yeah. Perk, I'll go first on this one if you don't mind.
Yeah, please do.
This movie kicks ass, man. I love this movie. It was so good. It's still relevant. A lot of these movies are still relevant. But like, I've not been feeling very patriotic the last probably 8 years, and obviously I've never really been a patriotic person, but this movie, it kind of wins you over. It's just like, look, like, it's really fucking hard to do good, and there's a lot of forces at play that have a lot of power, and I love how they showed the power of like money and how it works to kind of suppress the truth. But he wins. Like Mr. Smith is so just like honest to a point where it could be annoying, but he wins you over, and this movie just works so well. Like I really, really loved it.
Yeah, so I liked it quite a bit. I think it's far from perfect, but it's benefited by so many like great things. Like as we've already talked about, James Stewart is so good at acting, and so in the 4 movies I've watched with him in the past few months, in 3 of them he plays kind of like a straight man, like a good guy, and he's just so easy to root for. It's like impossible not to.
At Rear Window, I was against him a bit. And
okay, fair enough.
He was a bit of an asshole.
But he kind of sucks, but he's still charming.
Yeah.
Which I think that's part of why, I think part of that is why Vertigo worked so well for me. It's because, you expect him to just be the good guy, and he's just not. But and not to be overshadowed, Jean Arthur is terrific. Oh my
God, she's incredible.
She is so good.
So good.
She has a much smaller role, but does so much with it and has some very powerful emotional scenes. She also
the close-ups on her are just gorgeous and show emotion so well.
Right, and she doesn't suck as a character either.
No,
she's not just the blonde in the corner, which you could argue about in Vertigo, but in this one, even though she's the main love interest, she rocks. She has her own depth. She has her own motivations and portrays them really well.
Yeah, no, I think this movie is just outstanding. The combo of James Stewart and Jean Arthur is just incredible. I think the Thomas Paine character, or what is his name?
Joe Payne.
Joe Payne. Senator Joseph Payne, I think, is so good at being conflicted, but when he needs to lie, he sells it. That stuff is really powerful. And then you got the kind of cartoony villain of Jim Taylor, but I still bought it. But yeah, James Stewart's sincerity and the filibuster scene, my God, I mean, all that stuff, everything in the Congress Hall, I'm blanking on the name of it, in the Senate, so exciting. I'm expecting, I mean, it's a movie, so it's going to be a little bit more exciting, but I was expecting to be that's a little bit more boring section. No, these people are yelling, they're going, I got to get recognized by the president first, all that stuff. I'm in, man. And this movie freaking moves. I love how it's edited, how it's paced. We're go. We just get to the point of every scene and then go to the next part. I was expecting a slower movie for some reason, and this movie is very fast, and I really appreciated that.
So I'll disagree with you a little bit on the pacing, because I think it's a little bit start-stop, immediately gas off the line, but then we got to stop for this. The connective tissue between scenes is lightning fast, almost to a off-putting degree. It takes 6 minutes for Mr. Smith to get introduced, the plot to start, the governor to talk to his family, talk to his advisors, and then Mr. Smith's in Washington in 8 minutes.
I like that though. I'm let's start the movie, man. Mr. Smith goes to Washington. He's there. We're going.
Right. And you know what? That's fair. And then they do, when they get to some scenes, they dwell on him for quite a while. Him visiting Washington takes I was never bored. I was never bored or anything. I just thought that the pacing was a little all over. And yeah, the Senate floor scene is pretty much the back third of the movie.
Yeah.
So they definitely take their time there, which is good. But yeah, in between, you just get some scenes where oh my God, did just 7 things just happen?
Do those kids all get killed by a car?
Yeah, in a really quick shot. What the hell?
I know, man. Yeah, I think I agree, but I think I like it overall. And the slow scenes in the beginning with the monuments pay off at the end when he goes back to Lincoln Memorial and he's crying. Yeah. And he's this is all fucking lies and stuff,
Right.
But yeah, also talking about the kids in that opening scene that's super fast. The mayor and all of his kids are so politically engaged and screaming at him at the dinner table. I was dying, dude. I'm imagine if the kids of America cared this much about politics. What a country this would be.
That was one of the other things that I thought was a little bit of a weaker spot, is in scenes with an ensemble where it's more than just dialogue back and forth. The scene where the governor's talking to his kids, it doesn't feel like dialogue. It almost feels like roll call. It's more like
yeah.
you talk and now you talk and now
Yeah.
you talk and now you talk, and they're all like incredibly opinionated. Like, you need to elect Jeff.
Yeah.
It's like, why do all of these kids know who this is and the father doesn't?
Mhm.
And why are they all just in roll call like
screaming at him?
Yeah. And it happens a little later when I think Jeff. So after he goes on a tirade and starts punching people, which felt
we need to talk about that. But
okay,
continue.
but we'll come back. But after that scene, when he comes into it's like a bar where all the paparazzi are hanging out.
It's like the press. Yeah, press place. I don't know.
When he gets there and it's a giant, almost mob talking at him, it's once again, it feels like this is maybe just like an editing problem. I thought that the editing is like clearly showing its age, but it's another just like one person talks and then the next and then the next and then the next, and in very like stilted, almost like a roll call. Whereas like you could say somewhat similar about like Aaron Sorkin, where nobody talks like that.
Yeah,
but it's aesthetically it works.
Yeah,
like it's not, it doesn't stick out to the ear that people are talking that fast. But
yeah,
in this case, it's like, it just feels like they kind of just went shot, without too much balance. Right. Which, it's only a couple scenes, and the scenes where it's mainly just two people conversing at a time, it's not really an issue. But,
right. Yeah.
That it's just one of the only a couple things that really stuck out for me. Because overall, like, I was super down, and it's crazy because there's tension and stuff like who talked first, like who is the Senate leader gonna point to? It's like Senator Smith. Oh, yeah, let's go.
And he's gonna filibuster all the people run out, filibuster all the press. We gotta stop the people. Like whenever the press got excited, I got excited. I'm like, oh, someone's happening.
Yeah. And like when it got to the end, just to like finish my summative thoughts, like it got to the very end when Payne comes back in and confesses, and I'm sitting here on my couch. I'm like, why am I crying? What, I'm crying right now? What is this? Is just a political movie in the Senate floor. Why are tears coming out of my eyes?
Yeah. No, it's great, man, and
super effective.
I want to get back to that, but before I want to talk about the punching, because that shit. I'm like, is this a dream? Like, what is? There's no way in hell this person who's supposed to be like super like humble and nice, and Boy Scout, he starts straight clocking any person he sees. Like
everyone with like a notebook that he sees, he's just like,
or people were just reading the article. He was going over and just clocking them. Like, what the? Yeah, that was very out of character. I didn't like that, but I liked how it ended with him at the press and them explaining to him like, this is how it works, and him accepting that and like, learning something. But yeah, what the fuck was that, dude? That felt so out of character.
So, and it's never really brought back because he just goes back to being Ranger Rick after that.
I'm convinced the police don't exist in this world because he's punching people with no repercussions, and then all the stuff at the end with the kids. Who cares? We're just murdering children.
Right.
But yeah, the stuff at the end, like, man, I was worried there was going to be, maybe not worried, I don't know. What if I was like, okay, they bring in all the telegrams, like, oh, I was going to like find one in there that like was like kind or something. But I just love the direction of like, Taylor used his 1E to basically like stuff him out and kind of win. But it was the sincerity of Mr. Smith that won over Payne, who was been conflicted this whole time, but that finally was like, I just have to cave because like I just can't take it anymore. Like he's right. And, I'm going to tell the truth. Like, I think that was it felt more honest, even if maybe that wouldn't actually happen, but it just felt more honest of like the good guys didn't come up with like a secret plan or, a clever way to win. It's like, no, like they just tried very hard for a long time and showed their sincerity, and it eventually turned the bad guys, over to a new leaf. And I think I just love that as like a theme.
Yeah. So I think that the way that they handled it is just, it leads to just the absolute best catharsis. It's just one of the most beautiful, like, feelings of relief you get from the ending of a movie that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And, but the ending here, kind of leads me into a difficult reading on this movie, that it's kind of aged into a horror film. because what we see is, you're right, this guy is just sheer will, truth, and honesty.
Mm-hmm.
And he wants to do what's right for the children of America. And so what happens up to the climax? He gets snuffed out by a political machine,
yep.
and it works.
Yeah.
And they do it well, and he gets 50,000 letters saying, stop doing this, you're going to starve our children.
Yeah.
And the whole time I'm like, oh God, how are they going to find the way out? Yeah, maybe one of his newspapers got into that pile.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking maybe one of the ones that the boys printed. And no, it just comes down to like his sheer honesty overpowering the conscience of Senator Payne. And this is why it's a horror movie, because politicians don't have consciences anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if this was a modern telling, he would just lose. He would just pass out and then not be a senator anymore, and everything goes back to normal.
Yeah.
And the dam gets built. So it's a little scary, but in the moment, who cares? I mean, when he comes back onto the floor and he's spilling his guts and he's like, everything that man said was true. I'm out here just like jumping around, just jumping for joy.
Yeah.
Tears streaming down my face.
And I agree with you, but I also disagree a little bit. Like,
okay.
Because I think this movie is still relevant because I would hope it shines light. It's like, hey, people, this is why billionaires are bad. This is why money, like, this is what can happen to media. Like, maybe pay more attention to the media you're consuming and where you're getting it from, and like the stories being spun or told here. Like, I think for that like message, it's incredibly relevant, and I think it's still
100%.
Works. And like, but yeah, we don't even have the filibuster anymore. Like, I think they passed a law where you can just say filibuster and you don't actually have to get up there and talk for 24 hours. Like, we gotta bring that shit back, man, because they're like, one of the lines I like is the senators are like talking in the back room, and they're like he wouldn't be up there this long if he didn't believe in what he was saying, like
that is a really good moment.
Yeah, like there are a lot of like great lines like that, but yeah, we don't have that anymore in this country. Like, and yeah, a lot of the politicians are just completely corrupt and bankrupt. But I think this movie can show people, it's like, not to say it's bad to like be an honest, a good person, but it's more just like, hey, look at the things that can happen and what money can do, and maybe just pay more attention to what you're seeing and what you're consuming, and try to be smarter about your decisions, But then, yeah, I think it's a good message of like, also of like, you can do good for a long time and not see a result, but if maybe someone else, or just if doing it long enough, I think things will eventually get better. So I think this movie is very important for like people to see still. Like I said when we watched Do the Right Thing, that I think every American should watch that movie. I think every American should also watch this movie. I think they are both very important to like the current time.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. It's incredibly relevant. It's on a much smaller scale than what goes on nowadays, because just of the limitations of media. But part of the reason why I take like the cynical look on the way it projects is because it's just gotten way worse.
Oh yeah.
Like it's not, there are a couple of corrupt senators. It's like, no, literally everyone in government has some corporation in their pocket, and it's just accepted, and we just have to deal with it. So you're right. I think actually I think this is really important watching, and I think a lot of people could get a really good, almost like educational lesson off of it.
Yeah. And
like how the inner workings of like political corruption happen in a more simplified way than you would be able to do now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just it's tough to think about where we are, and if that's where we were then. Yeah. Oh boy, things have certainly not gone better, but what you're saying is true. The message transcends and is absolutely applicable to what's going on in current politics.
Yeah. And I also think it's educational, just like, here's how a bill gets passed, and here's how like the Senate procedures work. Like some of that stuff, there's not a lot of it, but it was interesting of like, I don't understand how like the president's recognize the person and then they can do what they want to do, or you got to do this, the bill has to go to committee and they change it. I mean, I do some of that stuff from just, being on TikTok and reading articles and stuff, but it was nice to get like a nice condensed like version of it all. And that scene with him and Saunders trying to write the bill but kept being distracted by each other, like, so good, man. Like,
it was really good.
And like that coming back with like his mom sending her the jam and stuff, like their chemistry was fantastic.
Yeah, they were so good together. It felt just very natural chemistry. It was awesome to watch.
Yeah. I also like the cinematography of this movie, specifically the scene where he's talking to Payne's daughter and they just show the hat, him holding it
Yes,
and then dropping
I
it.
like that scene a lot.
So smart and just shows exactly what he's trying to show here. And yeah, I think I agree with the editing is aged a bit, but I think that it's shot well. Like, and there's some good choices made there. I mean, for some reason I was thinking of the scene where he's punching people and he's punching like straight into the camera and all that stuff. Like, I don't know, very very goofy part of the movie, but they got the point across, I guess.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like I said, the editing I don't think is perfect, but the shots are really, a lot of them are really beautiful, and the black and white lends itself to kind of epic views of things, and you've got some really cool shots of him at his desk, like shooting up at him and kind of showing him in the light. And I really like the way that the movie looks, even if I don't quite love how it's put together.
I have two more notes I want to mention of just scenes that I liked a lot.
I have a couple little tidbits too, so go ahead.
All right, so one is just the whole time Saunders was drunk with Diz. Loved all that. Like,
that's one of my notes too. I really like their dynamic.
Yeah, and
very sweet.
And just the fact, like, you tell their drunks are hiccuping and stuff, which is a little bit comic book or comic-y. But like what they're talking about and her just being like, God, this shit sucks. I hate this place. I only got like, and then her going and telling Jeff the truth and everything. Like, I feel like, maybe not often, but a lot of times when like characters are drunk in a movie or a show, it's like never worth it. Like, it's just played for laughs, or like it just uses a cheap device to like make them tell the truth. But I think this was like done very well. I just liked it a lot. And then the other last one I have is just Taylor telling him, like, or him getting warned, like, they will destroy you if you like stand up against them, and him being like, I'm gonna fight anyway, and me being like, what's the worst they can do? They fucking dismantle him, like, in like the worst way of like, yeah, he's actually stealing money from the kids, and like, and they forged the like, I did not expect that, and I thought it was such an effective way to show the power of Taylor and be like, yeah, he completely fucked him.
So that's another part where I thought, even though the pacing is breakneck during that whole debacle, because it's like, in 5 minutes we go from him in the Senate to him getting kicked out of the Senate. But the way that it's put forward with all the steps, like all of these things that they go through to destroy his image, so effective. I agree with you.
Yeah. And I bought it. I'm like, that plan would work, and it was horrible. Like, Jesus Christ.
Yep. And then I just had a couple more little things. I giggled when they said 96 men in a room, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, because we didn't have Alaska or Hawaii yet. Yeah,
that's actually really funny.
Yeah, and then I really, really loved the line when Jeff is talking about what it's like to come out of a tunnel into the beautiful prairie, and Saunders says, I guess I've always lived in the tunnel.
Yeah.
I was like, damn.
Yeah.
What a line. I love that so much.
Yeah, and that whole scene, like when he's describing Montana, I guess, and just we get the shot of her just looking up.
Yeah, just tearing up a little bit almost.
Like just a gorgeous shot, and you can tell like she's just enamored with him, and he's won her over, and oh my God, it's just gorgeous. And you're in too, man. Like,
oh yeah.
I said, I don't normally like these characters that are always happy and always, but the thing is, he's not though. He breaks, when he's crying at Lincoln's memorial, and then she comes back and kind of rescues him, and man, so good. But yeah, I was thinking of like recommendations. I feel like this must have been an inspiration for Dave, the Greg Kinnear movie where an average man he impersonates the president gets sick, and so they bring him in to like pretend to be the president. Did you see this movie with Sigourney Weaver?
No.
Oh, great movie.
Okay.
He's just like a common man, and he has to pretend to be the president. Well, because they don't want to tell the public the president's like sick.
Yeah.
But he's like looking over, the budget, and he's like, this doesn't make any sense. He brings in his accountant to like balance the budget, and he's like, I already spent all this money advertising cars, and we could like help kids. It's a little bit more like unbelievable, but it's like, what if a common man was the president, kind of a thing, and it's a good time. So I'd recommend Dave.
Do you know where my mind went when you said a recommendation would be Dave?
The Little Dicky show on Hulu.
Yeah. The Little Dicky show on Hulu. I was like, all right, I'm listening. I want to see how you tie this in.
No, this is we watched it in civics class, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
But yeah, Dave featuring Greg Kinnear and Sigourney Weaver would recommend.
Nice. Yeah, I don't really have any recommendations based on this one. Like, there are some political dramas I really like, but not really in this vein.
Right. Yeah, this is more hopeful than most
Yeah.
political dramas, which I think is we need it, this time. But
I suppose like positive political stuff. I really like the movie The American President.
I haven't seen that one.
Rom com about the American president.
There you go. Well, that is our review of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Stay tuned for what we're revealing watching next week. But before that, I got a book review to end up the show here. Perk and I haven't had time to watch stuff. I've been gaming a lot. Steam Next Fest was last week. Perk and I played about 20 different game demos. I was cranking them out, trying to figure out what's going to be hot this year. But I also finished my book, which is a large tome called The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. So for those who don't know, Brandon Sanderson is, I'm pretty sure, he's like the most popular fantasy author right now. He's just cranking out books left and right, super highly regarded and reviewed. And I've been wanting to read one of his books for a while, but just haven't had the chance. And then I got this book as a gift. So I'm like, oh, here we go. I'm going to get into it. Perk's book is fucking incredible. My God, this has reinvigorated my love of reading. And I'm like, I got to read all these books now and like everything this dude writes because I'm so in. So fantasy setting, we're, Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, fantasy setting. We follow kind of 4 different characters that are in different parts of this world. But eventually, they eventually kind of find out about each other, maybe interact here and there, but pretty separate. In this world it's pretty much all like just rock and stone, man. It's a desolate kind of continent. And there are these like storms that come in, these high storms that come in. If you're outside on these, Perk, you're dead, but they kind of infuse magic powers. And I'll get to that in a little bit. But what I love about this book is like the world building is fucking incredible. Like, it reminds me of One Piece of like everything is so well thought out. The cultures of these like cities and peoples are like so well thought out and so interesting. The money in this world, Perk, is, take like any gemstone, like an emerald or a ruby or sapphire, and they put them in these like glass, spheres. Mm-hmm. So that's the money. But also, if you leave them outside during one of these high storms, they get infused with light. And so people use the money also for like lamps and to light and stuff. And then also, if you put them in like a magical device, it can be used to power a machine. So like there are ones that if you put a ruby that's infused into like a machine, it can be like a space heater essentially for your room. So that's how the magic system is kind of using these spheres. So I love when like money has like an actual purpose that's like valuable, like we used to be on the gold standard and stuff. Anyway, so I love all that stuff. And then so the world is super interesting, and then the characters are so fucking awesome, man. Like, God, one of the characters is a son of a surgeon, so he was trained to be that, but then he had to go into the war, and he was a really good spearman, and then he becomes a slave, and then we meet him in this book, and he's a slave for the army, essentially. And his story is just like fucking incredible, him trying to rescue these other slaves there, and it reminds me a lot of Andor. Like, I know you didn't get to this part, but there's an arc in Andor with the prison break arc, and it's so fucking good. So I like love following his story. Then another person is like a war general for one of these armies in these powerful nations, and he's like having visions of like the past history that nobody really knows what happened in the past. It's like, what the fuck's going on there? And that's really interesting and like a cool mystery. And then the third kind of main story is this girl who is going to this kind of college essentially to try and study with this person, but she's actually trying to steal some shit so she can help her family, and that's a thing going on. This book is just, it's so fucking good. It has such good themes, similar to actually Mr. Smith that we just watched, of like, it's so hard to do good. And like the struggle of like, okay, I could save these 20 people, but I might lose 3 of my friends. Is it worth it? Every time I try to do something good, I fail. Is it worth trying again? Like stuff like that. What does it mean to like be a great nation? What does it mean to be a king? And like all that kind of stuff. And the importance of like history and like, why are things the way they are? Like very relevant themes again that to this world, but it's set in this really cool fantasy setting. And yeah, I just absolutely adored it. Like, I don't want to like say too much as explode or anything, but I just cannot recommend this stuff. If you like fantasy, if you're not like turned off by that, I think you gotta read this. Like, it's so fucking good. And there's 4 books out in this specific series. A 5th one's coming out this year, and there's 10 planned. So
10 planned.
Yeah, it's gonna be two sets of 5, and this is just one of this series called the Stormlight Archive. There's another like a series set in the same universe called Mistborn. Maybe it's on a different planet. I'm not sure. Maybe a different continent. I'm not sure how that works. I haven't read it yet. But so this dude's got a whole universe cooking, and as far as I can tell, it slaps. So I'm excited to like read more of this, start my archive, and then go to Mistborn and do all that stuff. So as a person who likes big stories like One Piece and like really well thought out worlds and magic systems and all that stuff and good characters, I mean, I'm in, Perk. I'm locked in. This is so fucking good. So yeah, check out The Way of Kings if you need a good read. And if you want to, like me, rediscover your love of reading, I think this would be a good one to start with. So there you go.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Books are cool.
Stay
in school, kids.
I'm back, baby. So yeah, that is our show for this week. Next week, we're doing another classic that neither of us have seen. Right, Perk?
Correct.
There we go. Casablanca. I'll be following Claude Rains, who played Senator Joseph Payne.
Joe Payne, yeah.
In this movie. So Casablanca, that is streaming on Max. It'll be easy to watch. Don't really know much about it, Perk. I think it's a love story, maybe.
Yeah, I know that we get to see old friend Ingrid Bergman.
Oh, yeah.
From Murder on the Orient Express.
I'm excited for that. So yeah, next week, Casablanca on Max. But until then, thanks for watching. Bye.
Bye-bye.